everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Dan, go ahead and introduce yourself and the name of your business.
Sure. I'm Dan Pinkham, and my business is Lakehurst Consulting.
Awesome. We so look forward to learning more about your consulting business. But before we do that, we want to learn a little bit more about your journey. So Dan, tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. I grew up in rural Maine, and since then I've traveled around the country. But along the way, I earned a degree in chemical engineering, and I worked in chemical plants as an engineer and a manager for about 15 years. 3 states, 3 companies, a bunch of M&A along the way. And during that time, when I was in engineering, I went through and received my Lean Six Sigma certification as a black belt. And I know that sounds super technical and maybe a bit martial arts, but what it's really all about is learning tools and techniques to apply to business to both reduce the variation of the things we produce and improve the flow through our processes.
Right.
So did that in plant locations, and then for about another 15 years helped as a corporate executive for a couple of different companies build those sorts of programs for our sites around the world, and did that very successfully. Along the way, earned a couple of patents around efficiency around energy, so that's kind of cool.
Oh yeah.
Spent over a decade at a large salt and fertilizer manufacturing company, building out an operational excellence program where we saved 3 to 5% of our cash costs every year by doing continuous improvement activities. And so did that, and about 6 years ago, I decided it was time to hang out the shingle and use those same skills to benefit small and medium-sized businesses who all have similar problems to the big guys, but might not have the resource or the technical capability to do those sorts of improvements. And I'm that outside set of helping hands for them to do that.
Awesome. Now, let's talk a little bit more about your Six Sigma and that experience and how it helped you to get through those different corporate companies that you were with. What made you decide to go and take on that extensive part of learning?
I think as an engineer, I'm always looking to learn, and this was another set of skills that would augment what I had gained just by the normal course of going to school and learning a degree program. This was more applied. How do you go out? I think one of the things, people often in Six Sigma, it's around using statistics to identify cause and effect at its kind of base level. But to do that, there's a whole lot of soft skills and team building that goes into that to make sure you have the right people engaged in identifying the problem, properly defining it, and then working to fix it. And so they don't teach that in engineering school,
Right.
But they do as part of that training program, and had a lot of success at a plant level as a practicing engineer and manager, using those tools and working with teams. And it just has, as somebody who's a natural problem solver, having that problem solving methodology presented and being trained on it and validated that I could actually execute it to a degree to get success was I think a nice augmentation for me, and hopefully for the companies and people I've worked with to make things better. At the end of the day, it's all about that client you're working with and helping them make things better for them. Oftentimes, for me, it's how do we make things flow reduce costs and help them with that bottom line at the
Yes.
end of the day.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. A lot of people don't understand the importance of that particular training. So I wanted you just to dive in there a little bit so they can understand those foundational pieces that you're going to share in a few minutes. But before we get to that, you were successful inside of some corporations. You said you were there for many years. You were able to work for some big companies. But then that time came about 6 years ago where you start to have some different type of thoughts and going out on your own. Dan, was there a event that happened that made you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to burn the ship and go all in on my business?
Short answer is yes.
Okay.
I've been through multiple mergers and acquisitions, which always puts things up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And then, along with that, also several high-level management changes, which um, oftentimes result in the direction of what you're doing internal to a business changing.
Okay.
And sometimes that makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. And at the end of the day, it was I wanted some flexibility in how I live my life, how I manage the rest of my career, and really wanted to go out and help businesses who recognized they had a need and could use that help, and were willing to reach out and say, "Hey, let's work together and figure things out." So it was really around how to, getting out somewhat off that corporate hamster wheel
Mm-hmm.
and taking charge of my own destiny, betting on myself, if you will.
Yes, yes, yes. I already know, Dan, before we get into it, that you're a successful person. I can tell the way you explain things and you carry yourself. And I want you to go ahead and tell us all about your consulting business. Tell us what it is that you're doing for your clients, how you're helping them, and give us an illustration of what your ideal client looks like.
Sure. So at the core of what I do is help people recognize um, and define the problems that they have. Because oftentimes they know something's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
they just don't know what. Or they may think they know what, but they fix the same problem over and over again. And so I thrive on coming in and working with a company's team to help them define that problem, and we do that through a number of different ways. Usually, up front, there'll be a discussion with whoever is the sponsor to bring you in,
Mm-hmm.
but we get the right people in the room, and we will oftentimes, since I work on both kind of back office business process and manufacturing, if it's a manufacturing process, well, oftentimes we'll go out and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no better thing than going to the work and seeing it happen. With back office stuff, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go look at it and we'll make sure, okay, sometimes we figure out what the problem is by asking what it isn't and working backwards, but
Mm-hmm.
we will define it. And then in most cases, these problems are around some sort of process behind the scenes. And everybody has business processes. They might not just think of them that way. So, for example, just doing payroll for a small business is a process. How do you do it? When do you do it? Who does what? What are the handoffs? Um, what's the cadence? Those sort of things. And we'll walk through all that on whatever process it is we're working with and figure out where is from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, the waste.
Mm-hmm.
And so think of it more generically as inefficiency. So it can be you're transporting something too much, you've got too much inventory, too much motion of people moving things around.
Mm-hmm.
You might have waiting for somebody upstream to hand you off a step in the process. Overproducing. Are you making too much? You think having more is good, but that's tying up costs and higher value of inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Are you over processing or touching things too much? When you touch them, are you creating defects? And so those are some of the waste, but the most critical waste is people's unused creativity. And
Okay.
are we tapping into that team who is closest to the work to try and work through those issues.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing that all right, we've got the team engaged in defining the problem. We've got them using all their skills. They know what the wastes are. We can look at that process and say, where in that process do we have these things? And then we figure out what the new process, the future state's going to look like if we take that stuff out. So it's
Okay.
really around kind of deconstructing the puzzle of work,
Mm-hmm.
taking out the pieces of the puzzle that don't fit,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting that puzzle back together so it's going to give a much clearer picture uh, of how things are, and then putting that into place and helping the client's customers, because usually it's going smoothing that out. It's going to make things better for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's also going to make the people doing the work have a much more enjoyable, less frustrating experience. And if we're doing this right, it should result in improved earnings for the company.
Okay. Okay. Now, you mentioned something as far as the people inside of the company. When a person like yourself is introduced to an organization, the owner, CEOs, they know what's going on, but you have to deal with the individual employees, and they are going to have trepidation when you come through because most times they think you're going to come in and fire people. How is it that you work with them and try to get them to understand you're there to help instead of just giving them the axe?
Yeah, so you ask the easy questions, don't you? Um, it's really that initial stage
Mm-hmm.
of getting that team together in the room. So as an example, I went through this last week with
Okay.
a company um, that's family office owned. They're having issues as they grow to get more stuff out the door to
Okay.
their clients
Mm-hmm.
in a way that the client in um, with everything the client is expecting. And so it was a great experience because I had the owner of the company, I had his CFO, I had various functional leaders of that company, and I had the three people who are closest to the work doing the work all together in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And while the CEO or owner may know what's going on, oftentimes they don't have an appreciation of what's really happening on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is true in the opposite direction. So by getting that group together, talking about what the problem is, making sure we refine it, giving people a chance to say up front what they think is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
um, you now quickly go from, and I've done this in locations all over North America, Europe, even a little bit in South America. When you get that group together and you let them vent the frustration they have as part of that initial conversation,
Mm-hmm.
um, they buy in very, very quickly.
Okay.
You have a transition that happens in front of your eyes where it's no longer a group of 6, 8, 10, 12 individuals. It's now a team
Mm-hmm.
now working to fix that problem together.
Okay.
And so it's very interesting. I've been doing this type of work specifically for um, over 25 years now, and I've seen it in all these different environments, be it at a mine site in Canada, at a chemical plant in the UK, last week at Lake of the Ozarks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it they grab a hold of it, and are you going to get 100% everybody
Right.
feeling good about it? No, that's just not how we as humans work.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can get 85+% all pulling the oars in the same direction to row the boat,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get there. And the other thing is follow up and
Okay.
making sure that as we develop a plan to improve things, that it gets done
Mm-hmm.
and people are accountable for doing those actions. And along the way, we want to measure how were we before we did this? How are we after we do this? Did we move the needle or not? And
Okay.
that's how you build that trust and engagement, and it helps change the culture of a company. Oftentimes, it's very neat to be there on the front end of all that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I I have a person in front of me that has a wealth of knowledge, so I'm trying to extract it for these viewers. And I do have another question, nothing too tough or anything like that, but I want to try to continue to create a great painting on the canvas so they can really understand what it is that you're doing. So I want to ask as far as an engagement. So give us an example of what, I know they're all vary because each one is unique, but just give us an idea of what an engagement looks like when they bring you on to work with them. How long and just an average, an idea.
Sure. So it can run from, to take a quick step back, as you alluded, the problem really defines the solution,
Right.
and so with that defines the engagement. Typically, what we'll do is some upfront chats with the people who recognize, hey, we got a problem we don't know what to do about. We could use that outside set of eyes and facilitation to help address it. So we'll have some upfront. We'll agree on a kind of a basic scope of work and how long it's going to take. If it's a very focused problem-solving effort, it's usually a few days with the team to get it going, to work through the whole, to at the end of the day get a plan to execute to fix the problem. So it's usually a day or so to get the team together to define the problem and map it out to get a current state, assuming that it is a process flow kind of issue. We will then spend some time using those wastes as a way to jog ideas. And if I've got it mapped out, I like to make things visual if you haven't figured that out.
Yes.
So we're going to map things on a wall or a whiteboard. We're going to use Post-its to say, where in this process are things not working? Where they're going to say, what's causing that and what can we do about it for an improvement plan? We'll build out what the process would look like if we do that streamlining. And oftentimes we will track things like how long does each step take? How long does the whole process take? The difference between the sum of those steps and the process tells you what your opportunity is. Oftentimes that's where the quote unquote waste is in terms of waiting or lost time. Most processes, you're only spending about 10% of your time actually making something that the ultimate customer cares about, and the rest is just inefficiency or non-value added activity. And so we want to make sure we're making those choices. So we'll spend day 2 kind of working through a future state in a plan, and then it's building out the kind of the more formal plan and the process for follow-up after that, depending on does the client want my help to help run that from a project management perspective, or do they feel like they can do that themselves? So usually from beginning to end, it depends on how complex the process is. That 2 or 3 days to get it mapped out might wind up being longer. It might depend on how much time can they dedicate people in the room at the same time all day or not, and that lengthens it out. But we're talking, a few days of team time, usually a couple of weeks to get from beginning to end with a firm plan in place for them to execute. And then it's just how fast can we go start checking off those things we identified to fix. If we're doing it right and there's a lot of urgency, we can sometimes do that while we're there and move things around and make things work, and then it compresses that improvement time. Oftentimes it's a little bit longer. So like the process I worked on last week with that family-owned manufacturer, we spent 2 days mapping it out. We probably could have used a little bit more time, but that's what they could dedicate. And I'm about to send them a final report. We'll have a conversation, and then it's a matter of that plan says we've got to do some further definition over the next couple of weeks, and then execute between now and the end of the year, just as an example.
Yeah, I know none of the things that you do is a combo combo B, combo C, because you are fixing unique problems. But I just wanted to give them an idea of how it works. What is
Yeah.
the foundation of how you get to the what's not right, so you can start to come up with solutions. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, each problem and situation is a little different.
Yes.
But usually, if it's a flow kind of issue, it's amazing how the process of working through it is very similar.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we've talked a lot about what it is that you do. We talked a lot about the process, but I want to put a little bit more definition on what that ideal client looks like. Do you have a framework of what you would say would be a preferred or an ideal client that you're trying to get after?
Uh, yes, generally it is small to medium-sized manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So people who are doing some sort of converting operation from a raw material to a finished good that they're then putting into the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a discrete good, a widget, if you will,
Yeah.
or it could be something that's made in a continuous process. So as I mentioned earlier, I was in the chemical industry. We typically did things in big continuous process operations, so very familiar working with that. But that being said, small to medium, because the big guys usually have somebody like me inside already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you think of in terms of people size,
Mm-hmm.
they've got a. I've worked with companies as small as, or sites as small as, 20 folks. It can go up on, anywhere on up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from there, usually if you get to above a couple hundred, they probably have some inside capability, but sometimes even if they do, they want an outside set of eyes to come in and help.
Right.
So companies of that size tend to be, from a sales perspective, usually in the 10 to 20 million at the low end and on up from there. And if you get up to, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, again, they typically have some internal resource that do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. But
But that being said, I've done stuff with insurance companies on process
Mhm.
and hospitality companies on process, so it doesn't necessarily have to be manufactured.
I got you. It's just people who need to refine their process. It seems to be the people you need to get in front of.
Yeah, and I think another key point as we are looking to the future,
Mm-hmm.
when we look, factories for years and years have done automation,
Right.
and we are now on the age of a lot of business process automation. We've got AI coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to automate an inefficient process or a broken process. So having done those thoughts and lined things out and standardized ahead of time
Mm-hmm.
is really important if you want to take those next steps to build some efficiency by using the tools that are out in the marketplace.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, the next section that I want to talk about, which I already know you are going to nail this one, is talking about some of those best practices or some of those business skills that you have acquired and nurtured over time that have helped you to be successful in your career, that maybe some of the entrepreneurs and business leaders that are watching today can add to their mix and try to strive toward that same success. Can you share some of those?
Sure. So I think at the high level, having some sort of standard process to follow is very important. So I'm sure, given a lot of the listeners out there, they might be familiar with something called EOS, Enterprise Operating System.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of standardized systems. So you have a way of building out your business, meeting each day, that sort of thing. That takes place, is very similar. That EOS approach is very similar if somebody's doing a pure lean manufacturing on a plant floor. Um, you want to know who's doing what, did they get it done or not? Did you win at business today? It's
Mm-hmm.
fundamental as that. So putting some standards in is very important to help you do that, because you can't, as I said a little bit earlier, you can't automate unless you have a standard process. Um, when you have that standard process, it makes it very easy to see when things get broken
Mm-hmm.
and where you need to go to fix them. So that's very key. I think having along with that, this kind of standard business process, having a standard process to address problems that we've just walked through. So I've got an 8-step process that I typically use, which we've kind of talked around, where we're going through first is getting the team together with the right people in the room. We want to define and describe that problem correctly so the team sees it the same way and make it visual. If we need to, um, we if it's urgent, we may try and contain the problem. That's called putting countermeasures in place, or uh, probably more relatable term is putting a band-aid on it.
Mm-hmm.
So in a factory, that might be if a machine isn't working, can you throw people at it for a while?
Yeah.
But you recognize that it's a band-aid and it shouldn't be on there forever. That just gives you time to work on the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the containment while you're fixing it. Then you want to identify, describe, and verify root causes, what's leading to that thing to happen in the first place, what's driving that waste. Next step is figuring out what are the corrective actions you can do to address it that are either going to get rid of those causes or reduce them to the point where they're very manageable. You want to then implement and make sure they make sense. We've got to guess, but the rubber meets the road when you put things in place. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's important to have some measures.
Right.
Um, and then the next thing you do is, okay, if it is working, um, we as humans like inertia. We like to slide back to wherever we were.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make that institutionalized? So what are you doing in terms of procedure? What are you doing in terms of automation or new tools to make it easy for people to do things the right way
Okay.
at the end of the day and make that transition? Um, and then the final step in that process is recognizing and congratulating the team for fixing it, fixing
Mm-hmm.
what happened.
Okay.
So having because that builds engagement and the flywheel for a continuous improvement culture.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of having a way to fix problems when they occur, having a way to standardize your process so when you know that problems occur. And I think the other piece of that's kind of an underlying um, fundamental requirement for both of those to work is to have respect for your people
Mm-hmm.
and to involve them throughout that. Um, it's not going to get fixed if they don't fix it. If things are broken and they don't feel heard, they're not going to come forward. You're just going to live with the pain indefinitely. But if they're engaged and involved and see the benefits of making things better, they're going to want to keep making things better.
Right.
And so that's how you build that continuing loop of improvement. So those would be some things that I would put out to your listeners as best practices to think about.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. All of those were wonderful points. I really do have, well, I really have started to understand the importance of recognition. It's one of those things where if your people inside of your office are happy, the work is happier, and it's just more productive because they are seen and they felt like they're being seen, and therefore because they feel as if they're being seen, they take more pride into it. So definitely appreciate that.
Absolutely, it can be as simple as a thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can do all the things beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
but just saying thanks for your contribution here, it's made a big difference to the company and hopefully to your work environment.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a big thing. So thanks for sharing that. Now, we've talked a lot about your journey, your engineering, and the beginning, and now your Six Sigma, your corporate experience, now your own business. And we want to talk a little bit about Dan. So, Dan, let's just say the consulting business is coming along great. You have tons of engagement, money and time is not an issue. What is it that Dan would do with his time?
Sure, great question. So I'm an amateur musician, and
Okay.
I have been so for a long, long time. And so wherever I've moved, and I think I mentioned I've been in a lot of different places,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I've always tried to find people to play music with.
Okay. Okay.
So having more time and availability to do that would be a nice thing to do. I think along with that is spending more time with family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's always it's as now an almost empty nester. That's getting moving to that different stage of life is you're getting fewer opportunities. You've spent more time with your kids than you will going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you have those great opportunities to spend time and experience with a family.
Now, you said amateur musician. What instruments or instrument are you working with?
I am primarily a bass guitarist,
Okay. Okay.
and so play in classic rock bands and kind of the little adjuncts to that. Um, but have played guitar and mandolin and started as a trumpet player way back when. So I'm very um, key on having arts in schools because I think you get a lot out of it that can lead to that critical thinking
Mm-hmm.
later in life, and hopefully I'm an example of that.
Yes, yes. That creativity comes from that music. I am a big believer in that. Now, if I put you on the spot and I threw a bass guitar into your lap, what song would you be able to play first from heart?
Oh, well, the go-to one um, in the music stores as I'm trying out instruments is "Hey Joe" by Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, okay, okay. That's a good deal. Always try to dive deeper into those things because we like people to understand, you as business owners do work hard to help other businesses or people, whatever your business is, but you do those things so you can live this thing that we call a life. So that's why I try to dive into that portion as well so people can understand it is good to try to have some sort of work-life balance. It won't ever be equal, but at least you can try to introduce some of it to it.
Yeah, and I think what you get out of that experience, um, for me as a musician working with groups and moving around the country, is it's a way to keep engaged. It's a way to kind of use different parts of your brain
Mm-hmm.
as you're playing. It's a way to get introduced to new culture, to new people, to a new environment. Because every place I've been has been a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a way to start a network, if you will, and oftentimes you're running into much different people than you would in just if you stayed in your tight business circle. So
Yes, yes.
it helps expand your perspective as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting us know a little bit about that. Now, Dan, if people have questions about your consulting business, those business skills, or just your story, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
So the best way is to go out to my company website, which is lakehurstconsulting.com. And that's got all my other contact information, email and phone number, etc. And there's also a way to there's a contact form which will come in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in addition to all that, uh, people who want to have that conversation, if it's just like this, what we've done the last 30 minutes or so,
Mm-hmm.
I offer a complimentary conference call to talk through what's up and kind of have that initial conversation
Mm-hmm.
with no commitment, and you can access that as well from the website.
Awesome, awesome. We truly do appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing with us about your journey, your business. And we always honor our guests by giving them the last word. So, Dan, please look into the camera and tell the people something good.
Sure. If you are a business owner who have fixed the same problem over and over again, you might want to consider a different approach. Structured problem solving and performance improvement is a way to get that. And by doing that in a very well thought way, oftentimes clients can improve their improve their cost by 3 to 5%, and that has a multiplying effect on your earnings. So if that's something you think is of value to you, you should be reaching out to somebody like me to have a conversation, and I hope you do so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us today, Dan.
Thanks for putting this together. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Yes, awesome. And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.